she was a black woman carrying a sleeping child through a five-star hotel lobby. And that was enough. Enough for Victoria Whitmore to stop, tilt her chin, and say, in a voice so low and so cold it could cut marble, "You need to know your place." The lobby went silent. Guests looked away. A 4-year-old girl woke up and started to cry. And Amara, beautiful, exhausted, sending money home every month to her sick mother in Ghana, closed her eyes, counted to 3, and stayed standing. Because that was all she could do. What nobody in that lobby knew was that every second of that humiliation was being recorded. And on the 14th floor, in a private monitoring room that appeared on no hotel map, a Korean Mafia boss worth more than everyone in that lobby combined was watching it all on CCTV. He didn't blink. He didn't speak. He simply picked up his jacket and went downstairs. What happened in the next 72 hours didn't look like revenge. There were no threats, no confrontations, no raised voices. What happened was quieter than that, and so much more permanent. Victoria Whitmore walked into that gala believing the world was stable beneath her feet. She had no idea it had already started to move. And Amara, sitting on that bench, holding a sleeping child and a stranger's handkerchief, had no idea that someone had just decided her life deserved to be different. But what he did next changed everything. Antes de iniciar a história, comenta aqui de onde você está assistindo e que horas são aí. Se histórias de karma, amor e verdades ocultas mexem com você, não deixa de se inscrever no canal. The Grand Elysium Hotel had a rule that no one ever wrote down, but everyone who worked there understood perfectly. Certain people entered through the front, and certain people entered through the side. It was never spoken aloud. It didn't need to be. Amara Osei had learned this rule on her first day 8 months ago, when a doorman had looked at her uniform, clean, pressed, modest, and then looked past her at the revolving door, as if she might have come in by mistake. She had smiled at him. She always smiled. It cost nothing and protected everything. That Tuesday evening, she carried Sophie through the front entrance because Sophie was asleep, because the side entrance was blocked by a catering delivery, and because, for one unguarded moment, Amara allowed herself to believe that a sleeping child in her arms was enough of a reason to exist in any space. The lobby was gold and marble, and the particular silence that money buys. Guests moved through it like planets in slow orbit, each one certain the universe arranged itself around them. Amara walked carefully, one hand beneath Sophie's small back, the other pressing the child's head gently to her shoulder. The girl breathed the slow, humid breath of deep sleep. The front desk clerk was polite. He checked the system. He said it would take a moment. In that moment, the elevator opened. Victoria Whitmore did not rush. She never rushed. Rushing implied that something existed in the world more important than her arrival. She crossed the lobby in a champagne silk gown that moved the way water moves, effortlessly, as if it had never known resistance. Her diamond necklace caught the chandelier light and scattered it. She was, by every visible measure, magnificent. She stopped when she saw Amara, not out of surprise, out of decision. Amara. Her voice was the temperature of marble. You are not here to socialize with the guests. There is a service entrance. You know this. Why are you at the main reception? Amara's mouth opened. Mrs. Whitmore, the card. I don't need an explanation. She said it the way someone closes a door, quietly, finally. I need you to know your place. The lobby did not gasp. Lobbies like this one had been built precisely so that uncomfortable things could happen inside them without disturbing the atmosphere. A woman near the concierge desk looked at her shoes. A couple from the elevator found something urgent to read on their phones. The clerk behind the desk became very busy with his keyboard. Sophie woke up. She looked at her mother with 4-year-old confusion, felt the tension she did not yet have words for, and began to cry. Amara closed her eyes. She did this when the world became too much, counted to 3 behind her eyelids, found the floor beneath her feet, remembered that she was still standing. Her grandmother had taught her this. When they try to make you disappear, child, you close your eyes and you find yourself. Then you open them, and you are still there. That is enough. She opened her eyes. She was still there. Victoria had already turned away, already moving toward the restaurant where 50 people waited to applaud her generosity toward causes she had never personally touched. Her heels clicked once, twice, and then she was gone. In the upper left corner of the Grand Elysium lobby, a security camera recorded everything in high definition: the angle of Victoria's chin, the stillness of Amara's posture, the moment Sophie's small hand gripped the back of Amara's blouse as if she understood, even at 4 years old, that something had been taken and not given back. On the 14th floor, in a private monitoring room that appeared on no hotel map and was accessed by a keycard that existed in only one person's possession, a man watched the screen. He did not move. He did not blink. He had seen this before. Not in this lobby, not with these women, but he had seen it in a restaurant 26 years ago, through the eyes of a 12-year-old boy who had watched his mother shrink beneath the weight of someone else's contempt and had never, not once in the years that followed, forgotten what that looked like. He turned to his assistant. "Find out who she is," he said, pointing to Amara on the screen. "And who the other one is." His voice was calm. That was the part that should have frightened someone. Park Soo-ah had worked for Jang Min-Jun for 6 years, and in those 6 years she had learned to read the weight of his silences the way sailors read weather. There were silences that meant he was thinking, silences that meant he had already decided, and then there was this silence, the one that settled over him like frost, which meant that something in the world had offended an order he considered sacred, and that the world was about to be quietly, permanently corrected. She had the information in 11 minutes. Amara Osei, 29, Ghanaian-born, American resident, 7 years. Works as a private nanny for the Whitmore family, 8 months. Also enrolled in a nursing program, evening classes, 3 nights a week. Soo-ah paused. She sends money home every month. Her mother is ill. Min-Jun said nothing. He was still looking at the screen, where Amara now sat on a bench near the lobby entrance. Sophie curled against her chest, a hotel employee offering her a glass of water with the cautious kindness of someone who had witnessed something they could not undo. "The other one," he said. "Victoria Whitmore, née Carlyle, 44. Married to Gerald Whitmore, real estate, private equity. He attempted to enter a partnership with your group 14 weeks ago." Now Min-Jun turned. "Whitmore," he repeated. The name landed in the room like something dropped from a height. "He presented falsified asset documentation. Your team declined without disclosure." Soo-ah kept her voice even. "You said at the time that you were archiving the name." "I did." "The archive has apparently become relevant." For a long moment, Min-Jun stood in the blue light of the monitors and said absolutely nothing. Then he picked up his jacket from the back of the chair, put it on with the unhurried precision of a man who had never once needed to rush toward anything in his life, and walked to the door. "Come," he said. They descended in silence. The lobby received him the way lobbies always received Min-Jun, without knowing why, but adjusting nonetheless. Guests shifted, conversations lowered by half a register. The air itself seemed to make room. He moved through it without acknowledging any of it, his eyes fixed on the bench near the far wall where Amara sat with her eyes down and Sophie now sleeping again against her shoulder, as if the child had decided that the world was too complicated and had simply opted out of it. He stopped in front of her. She looked up, expecting another verdict. "Are you all right?" he said. She blinked. The question did not fit the architecture of the last 10 minutes. She processed it the way you process light after a long darkness. Slowly, with some suspicion. Yes. Thank you." "Is the child yours?" "No, I care for her." He looked at Sophie, at the way the girl's fingers curled around the fabric of Amara's blouse even in sleep. The grip of someone who had decided, without words, that this was where safety lived. Something passed across Min-Jun's face that Sua had seen perhaps twice before in 6 years. It was not softness, exactly. It was recognition. He reached into the interior pocket of his jacket and produced a folded white handkerchief, the kind that existed now only as inheritance or deliberate anachronism, and held it out. Amara took it without fully understanding why. "You didn't deserve that," he said. 4 words. He said them the way someone states a fact about the weather, plainly, without decoration, without waiting to see how they landed. Then he turned and walked away, and the lobby rearranged itself silently in his wake. Amara sat with the handkerchief in her hands. It was monogrammed. She did not look at the initials. She was too busy feeling the strange, disorienting weight of being seen by a stranger in the exact moment she had decided to make herself invisible. She did not know his name. She did not know that, in the elevator rising behind her, a decision had already been made. Calm, total, and completely without mercy. That would, within 72 hours, dismantle the world of the woman who had spoken to her like she was furniture. She did not know any of it. She just sat there, holding a white handkerchief, while Sophie breathed slowly against her shoulder. And outside the revolving doors, the city moved on, indifferent and enormous, the way cities always do, entirely unaware that somewhere inside one of its gilded buildings, the quiet machinery of consequence had already begun to turn. The thing about power, real power, not the kind that arrives in silk gowns and borrowed diamonds, is that it does not announce itself. It does not raise its voice. It does not send warnings. It simply moves, quietly and with great patience, through the existing structures of the world, and by the time anyone notices the current has changed direction, they are already downstream. Min-Jun's team moved before midnight. Not with threats, not with confrontation. Those were tools for people who needed to be seen acting. What happened instead was a series of phone calls, brief, cordial, entirely unremarkable, between men who played golf together and sat on the same foundation boards and had, at various points, accepted quiet favors from a group of investment interests whose ultimate ownership was deliberately difficult to trace. 3 of the primary sponsors of Victoria Whitmore's charitable gala that evening maintained, through various intermediary structures, financial relationships with Min-Jun's organization. None of them knew each other well enough to compare notes. None of them needed to. They each received, independently, a piece of information, not a threat, just information, that made the name Whitmore suddenly feel like a liability they hadn't previously priced into their exposure. By the time the dessert course was being served in the gala's main hall, Two of the three had quietly instructed their assistants to draft withdrawal letters in the morning. Victoria sat at the head table and smiled for photographs, and did not feel a thing. This was, in retrospect, the most tragic part. Not what was coming, but how completely unaware of it she was. She raised a glass of Bordeaux and accepted a compliment about her gown, and believed, as she had always believed, that the world was stable beneath her feet, because it had always been stable beneath her feet. She had never once considered what was holding it up. The clip reached the first journalist at 11:43 that night. It had been edited with surgical precision. 2 minutes and 17 seconds of high-definition lobby footage, beginning the moment Victoria stepped off the elevator and ending the moment she walked away. There was no audio. It didn't need any. The angle of her chin said everything. The stillness of Amara's posture said everything. Sophie's small hand gripping the back of Amara's blouse said everything. The journalist watched it once, then again. Then she texted her editor. By midnight, it had reached a second journalist and a content account with 4 million followers whose entire audience had been built on exactly this: the precise, recognizable image of someone being reminded of their smallness by someone who had confused wealth with worth. The account posted at 12:17 with a single line of caption. By the time Victoria Whitmore stepped out of the elevator the following morning, dressed for a breakfast meeting, her phone had already received 47 missed calls. Her publicist had sent 9 messages. Her husband, Gerald, who had spent the night in the guest suite for reasons that had nothing to do with the video and everything to do with the divorce papers his attorney had been preparing for 3 weeks, had seen the clip at 6 in the morning on a news aggregator. He had not called her. That silence, Gerald's specific silence, was the one that would cost her most. Not the video, not the sponsors, not the journalists already drafting their pieces about performative philanthropy and the particular cruelty of the comfortable. It was the silence of a man who had been looking for a reason to feel nothing and had just been handed one in high definition. Victoria stood in the corridor outside the elevator and looked at her phone and felt, for the first time in longer than she could precisely remember, the specific vertigo of a world that was no longer arranging itself around her. She had done this to herself. She knew it, somewhere beneath the panic. The way you sometimes know the true cause of a wound before you're ready to name it. But knowing and understanding are different countries, and Victoria Whitmore had never held a passport for the second one. Down in the lobby, the same marble floor, the same chandelier light fracturing into 1,000 directions. A new shift of employees moved through their routines. The bench near the far wall was empty. The glass of water was gone. There was no visible evidence that anything had happened there at all. That was the nature of these things. The damage was never where the moment was. It was always somewhere further ahead, arriving quietly, long after the lobby had been cleaned and reset and made to look like nothing had ever been disturbed. The letter arrived on a Wednesday. Amara almost didn't open it. It had no return address, only her name written in the kind of precise, unhurried handwriting that suggested whoever had written it had never once been in a rush in their life. She turned it over twice, set it on the kitchen table of the small apartment she shared with a nursing school classmate, made herself a cup of tea, and then sat down and opened it. Inside was a single folded page and a document she did not immediately understand. The page said, "You deserve to arrive where you are going. This will help you get there." The document was a full scholarship letter, tuition, books, living stipend, from a foundation she had never heard of for the nursing program she had been paying for class by class, semester by semester, working around Sophie's schedule and her own exhaustion, and the guilt of knowing her mother's medical bills in Accra were growing faster than her savings. She read it 3 times. On the 4th reading, she began to cry. Not the careful, contained crying she permitted herself in difficult moments, the kind she did silently so no one would feel the weight of it, but the other kind. The kind that comes when something you stopped believing was possible turns out to be real. The kind that has no dignity and needs none. She did not know who sent it. She would never know. The Foundation's registered address led to a legal entity that led to another legal entity that dissolved quietly into the kind of corporate architecture that exists precisely to be untraceable. She asked. She tried. Eventually, she stopped trying and simply accepted it the way you accept certain things. Not because you understand them, but because grace, when it arrives, does not always come with an explanation. She kept the handkerchief. She never used it. She folded it carefully and put it in the small wooden box where she kept her grandmother's cross and a photograph of her mother from 1987, smiling in a yellow dress outside a church in Kumasi. The things she kept because they reminded her that she had come from somewhere, and that somewhere had been good. Victoria Whitmore's public apology posted on a Thursday and was ratioed within the hour. It was not a bad apology, technically. Her publicist had written it carefully, threading the needle between accountability and legal exposure, deploying the correct vocabulary of remorse. But the internet is a precise instrument for detecting the difference between feeling sorry and feeling caught. And Victoria's statement had the temperature of the second thing. The gala's 3rd sponsor withdrew that same afternoon. Gerald Whitmore filed for divorce the following Monday. His attorney cited irreconcilable differences. Victoria's attorney cited the prenuptial agreement, which Gerald's team had spent 3 weeks quietly, methodically preparing to contest on grounds that would require discovery of financial documents Victoria had spent years keeping separate from her husband's visibility. None of this happened loudly. There were no scenes in hotel lobbies, no dramatic confrontations, just the slow, grinding machinery of consequence, moving at the pace of legal calendars and public memory, and the particular permanence of things recorded and distributed at scale. Min-Jun heard none of the details. He did not follow the story. He had no interest in watching what happened after. That had never been the point. Sua told him, briefly, that the nursing student had enrolled. He was standing at the window of his office on the 14th floor, looking down at the city the way he always looked at it, as if it were a system he understood completely and trusted not at all. "Good," he said. He said nothing else. He returned to the documents on his desk. The city continued below him, indifferent and vast, full of lobbies and cameras and people moving through spaces that had been designed to remind them of their position. And full, too, of the smaller, quieter moments. A handkerchief offered. A letter opened on a Wednesday morning. A woman crying at a kitchen table over something she had stopped believing was possible. That no camera was positioned to catch. But that mattered more than anything the footage would ever show. That night, alone in his office after Sua had gone, Min-Jun opened the bottom drawer of his desk and removed a photograph he kept there and did not display. A woman in her 40s, Korean, standing outside a restaurant in Queens, New York, in what must have been the early 90s, her coat slightly too thin for the weather, her smile slightly too wide for the occasion, the particular smile of someone who has decided to be happy in spite of the evidence. He looked at it for a long moment. Then he put it back, closed the drawer, and went back to work. Some debts are never fully paid. Some wounds never fully close. But sometimes, not often, not enough, but sometimes, the world offers you a small, imperfect opportunity to answer an old wrong with a quiet right. And the only question is whether you are paying enough attention to recognize it when it appears on a screen in front of you, in a lobby you own, on an otherwise unremarkable Tuesday evening. Min-Jun had been paying attention for 26 years. If this story moved you, take a moment and ask yourself this. Have you ever been dismissed by someone who assumed they knew your worth just by looking at you, and had to find the strength to stay standing anyway? Have you ever witnessed an injustice in silence, not because you didn't care, but because you didn't have the power to speak? And if you did have that power, what would you have done with it? Tell us your story in the comments. We read every single one. And if you believe in stories about dignity, justice, and quiet redemption, don't forget to subscribe to the channel